She was supposed to be standing behind the woman who destroyed her. Instead, she was standing beside the most dangerous man in the room. And for the first time in a year, she wasn't afraid of anything. If you've ever been betrayed by the two people you trusted most, stay. Because this story is for you. Watch until the end, hit that like button, and drop your city in the comments. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. The bridesmaid dress was ivory. Zariah Brooks had thought about that specific detail more times than she could count over the past 3 weeks. Lying awake at 2 in the morning with the ceiling fan turning slow overhead, her apartment too quiet, her mind too loud. Ivory. Not white, not cream, not champagne. Ivory. Like Monique had selected the color specifically to remind everyone in that wedding party that she was the one wearing white now. That she was the one who had won. Zaria sat at the vanity in her hotel suite on the 14th floor of the Alderton Grand and stared at herself in the mirror. The dress hung on the closet door behind her, still in its garment bag. She hadn't touched it yet. It was 6:47 in the morning on a Friday, and the bridal luncheon didn't start until noon, and she was already exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't fix. She looked at her reflection the way you look at a stranger on the street, noting the details without real recognition. Dark eyes with shadows beneath them. Edges freshly done because she'd paid $40 for a touch-up the day before, out of pride more than anything else. High cheekbones. A jaw that was set a little too tight. She was 29 years old and she looked every bit of it this morning, which was something she was not used to. Zariah Brooks had always been told she was beautiful. She knew she was beautiful. That knowledge had never particularly helped her. She reached for the coffee on the vanity and drank it cold. The window behind her showed Chicago waking up. The lake flat and gray in the early light. Traffic already thickening on Michigan Avenue. The hotel's glass exterior throwing back the sky. She'd driven up from her apartment in Hyde Park yesterday afternoon, told herself she was doing this for professional reasons, which was a lie so thin she could see right through it. The truth was simpler and uglier. She was doing this because Monique Harper had looked her in the eye 6 weeks ago at the engagement dinner and asked her to be a bridesmaid, and Zariah had said yes before her brain had time to catch up with her mouth. And saying yes meant she was here, in this hotel, in this city she shared with them, getting ready to stand up in front of 400 people and smile while the woman who had slept with her boyfriend exchanged vows with him. She said it plainly to herself in the mirror because she had learned the hard way that euphemism was just a prettier way to keep bleeding. Monique had slept with Damien. Damien had let it happen. The baby had come, 7 months ago now. A boy they named Elias. And by then the relationship Zariah had spent 3 years building was already ash. There had been no dramatic confrontation, no screaming, no throwing things, just a phone call from Damien, his voice careful and measured the way it always was when he was managing a situation instead of feeling it, telling her that things between them had become complicated. Complicated. 3 years of her life compressed into one word that meant nothing. She had hung up the phone and sat on her kitchen floor for 45 minutes. Then she'd gotten up, washed her face, and gone back to work. That was who Zariah Brooks was. That was how she had survived everything before this, and it was how she intended to survive this too, by keeping herself upright, by refusing to let anyone see how deep the cut went, by doing the thing that was asked of her with her chin level and her face neutral. But standing in this hotel room at 6:47 in the morning, she was very tired of being strong. She finished the coffee, set the cup down, looked at the garment bag. "Okay," she said to nobody. She got up and unzipped it. The bridal suite on the 22nd floor was already a controlled disaster by 10 a.m. Monique's mother and 2 aunts were arranged on the sitting room furniture like birds on a wire, talking over each other with the comfortable aggression of women who had known each other for decades. A hairstylist had claimed the largest mirror. A makeup artist was setting up a second station near the window. Monique's younger sister Bria was eating a Danish and scrolling her phone on the floor near the door, still in her pajamas at a bridal event, which said everything about her relationship with authority. Zariah knocked and walked in because the door was cracked. Monique was already in the makeup chair, her natural hair pinned back, a silk robe around her shoulders. She looked up when Zariah entered, and her face did the thing it always did. That quick recalibration, the microsecond where the old guilt surfaced before the new confidence covered it over. "Z," she said and smiled. "I was wondering when you'd get here." "Traffic was fine," Zariah said, which wasn't what Monique had meant, and both of them knew it. She set her bag near the window and said hello to the aunts and to Bria, who waved without looking up from her phone. Mrs. Harper, Monique's mother, gave Zariah a hug that lasted a beat too long and had a quality of apology in it, which Zariah accepted with grace and released quickly. The other two bridesmaids were already there. Keisha, who was Monique's cousin and had the social awareness of a parking cone, immediately started talking about the centerpieces. Devana, who Zariah had met twice in her life, and who worked with Monique at her marketing firm, was helping the hairstylist unpack tools. Nobody mentioned anything about the history in the room. They never did. The arrangement only worked because everyone agreed not to talk about what the arrangement actually was. Zaria took a seat on the small couch near the window and pulled out her phone and looked at nothing. From the makeup chair, Monique said, "The orchids in the lobby are gorgeous. Did you see them on the way in?" "I wasn't paying attention," Zariah said. "White orchids. They must have done a whole installation." Monique tilted her face for the makeup artist. "The Alderton really does everything right. You chose well, baby." This last was directed at Damien, who had just come through the connecting door from the adjacent suite in a gray dress shirt, collar open, a coffee cup in one hand and his phone in the other. He looked good. He always looked good. Tall, dark-skinned, square-jawed, the kind of handsome that photographed well and aged better. He looked like someone's idea of a successful man. He had always known that and used it accordingly. His eyes found Zariah before he'd fully entered the room. She looked back at him without changing her expression. "Morning," he said, to the room generally. "Morning," the aunt said. Zariah said nothing. Damien poured himself more coffee from the service cart, and she watched him add cream, 2 sugars, the same way he'd always taken it, and she felt something move in her chest that was not love, not anymore, but was something adjacent to grief. The way you feel when you see an object from a previous version of your life and remember, briefly, who you were when you touched it last. She put her phone face down on the cushion beside her and looked out the window at Chicago. The luncheon was held in one of the hotel's private dining rooms, and it was fine. The food was good. The speeches were short. Monique cried twice, which was less than Zariah had expected. Mrs. Harper cried more and held Zariah's hand at one point across the table, and Zariah let her because the woman had always been kind and none of this was her fault. Keisha made a toast that went on 4 minutes too long. Devana laughed at everything. Bria ate 2 plates of food and said almost nothing, which was the most honest behavior in the room. Damien stopped by at the end, kissed Monique on the cheek, shook hands with relatives. As he was leaving, he paused beside Zariah's chair. "Can we talk?" Low, careful, that management voice. "About what?" He glanced around. The conversation nearby had shifted. How are you doing?" "Really?" She looked up at him. "I'm having lunch, Damien." "Zariah." "I'm having lunch," she said again, quieter. "At your rehearsal event, wearing the dress your fiancé picked out for me." "I'm doing great." He stood there a second longer. Something crossed his face that might have been guilt or might have been wounded pride. She'd stopped being able to distinguish between those two things in him a long time ago. Then he nodded and walked away. Monique hadn't heard. Or if she had, she chose not to show it. Zariah drank her water and looked at the orchid arrangement on the centerpiece and reminded herself that she was here for 48 more hours, and then this would be over. She needed air. At 2 in the afternoon, when the luncheon had wound down and Monique was being shuttled off for a spa appointment with the aunts, Zariah excused herself and took the elevator down to the lobby. The Alderton's main floor was a study in controlled luxury. High ceilings, warm marble, the kind of quiet that money buys. The orchid installation Monique had mentioned ran along the eastern wall, hundreds of white blooms banked against dark wood panels, and they were extraordinary. And Zariah hated that they were extraordinary. She was looking at them, not really seeing them, just giving her eyes somewhere to rest, when she turned to move toward the hotel bar and walked directly into someone. Not grazed, not brushed, walked into. Her shoulder connected with a chest that had approximately the structural integrity of a wall, and the impact was enough to knock her coffee cup, which she'd been carrying from the luncheon, out of her hand. It hit the marble floor and the lid popped and coffee went everywhere. "Damn," she said. She bent to grab the cup and straightened up and looked at who she'd hit. He was Korean, maybe mid-30s, and he was the kind of still that most people aren't. The kind of stillness that isn't passivity, but is instead the complete absence of wasted movement. He stood exactly as he had been standing before she hit him, which meant he hadn't moved at all on impact, which said something about the kind of body he had and the kind of man he was. He was dressed in black, dress shirt, no tie, dark trousers, and the shirt's open collar showed the beginning of ink, the edge of a tattoo that disappeared down beneath the fabric. His hands were at his sides. His face was composed. He was looking at her. Not the way most men looked at her, which was assessingly, the way you look at something you're considering purchasing. This was different. This was someone who had seen a great many things and was now choosing, for reasons of their own, to look at her specifically. Behind him, at a distance of perhaps 8 feet, 2 men in dark suits had stopped moving. They were watching everything without appearing to watch anything. There was a third man near the door. None of them had moved when Zoraya collided with their principal, which told her they'd assessed the situation in approximately 1 second and determined it wasn't a threat. She had done threat assessment for long enough. Her ex-boyfriend had taught her that, ironically, to recognize it when she saw it. She looked back at the man in front of her. "I'm sorry," she said. I wasn't watching where I was going." He looked at the coffee on the floor, then back at her. "Are you burned?" His English was precise, accent present but not heavy. The voice was low, not performing lowness, just naturally that register. "No," she said. "It wasn't that hot anymore." "Good." He said nothing else. She looked at him for a second longer than was strictly necessary, and he looked back at her for the same amount of time, and something moved in the lobby air between them that she couldn't have named, and then she gathered herself and said, "Sorry again," and walked past him toward the bar. She didn't look back. But she felt his gaze tracking her across the lobby until she turned the corner. The hotel bar was dark-paneled and quiet at this hour. A few business travelers on their laptops, a couple at a corner table speaking quietly. Zoraya took a stool at the far end of the bar, ordered a sparkling water, and sat with it and tried to make her thoughts slow down. The bartender was a young white guy with a neat beard who had the professional distance of someone who'd learned to hear everything and repeat nothing. She appreciated that. She sat with her water and her thoughts and the ambient noise of a hotel in the middle of a business day, and she worked on not feeling anything in particular. Her phone buzzed. "Monique, the spa is amazing. You should have come. Are you okay?" Zoraya put the phone face down. She was fine. She was going to be fine. She'd been fine for 12 months, and she was going to stay fine for the next 48 hours, and then she was going to go home, and this would be behind her, and she could get back to the ordinary business of rebuilding a life that didn't have Damien Cole in it anywhere. She had a good life. She did. She was a senior financial analyst at Meridian Capital, good at her job, respected by her team, working toward a VP position that her director had as much as promised her by end of year. She had her apartment, her routines, her small group of real friends. Not Monique, not anymore, but others. She had herself, which was more than she'd had at certain points. She just hadn't figured out yet how to have herself and be okay with that simultaneously. The bartender refilled her water without being asked. She looked up to thank him and caught movement at the entrance to the bar. One of the suited men from the lobby, sliding into a position near the door in a way that looked casual and wasn't. A moment later, the man in black walked in. He chose a seat at the bar 3 stools down from her. Not close enough to be immediately presumptuous, not far enough to be dismissive. He sat with the same quality of stillness she'd noticed in the lobby, ordered something from the bartender in a tone too quiet for her to catch, and looked at the bottles arranged behind the bar. He didn't look at her. For several minutes, neither of them acknowledged the other. The bar was quiet enough that she was aware of every movement he made, the way he picked up his glass, the way he set it down, the way he held himself like someone who had long since stopped worrying about being observed. "You're still upset," he said. She turned to look at him. "Excuse me?" He was looking at his drink. "Not at me, at something else. You've been sitting like that since before I walked in." She stared at him. "You can tell that from 3 seats away?" He turned to look at her. The directness of it was startling. Not aggressive, just without the usual social hedging, the way most people softened their attention to make it more polite. "What's your name?" "I don't know you," she said. "That's not an answer." "It is, though." Something moved in his face that wasn't quite a smile, but was in the same neighborhood. He turned back to his drink. Fair enough. She should have let it go there. She knew she should have. She looked back at her water and told herself to let it go. "Zoraya," she said. He turned. "My name is Zoraya." He looked at her for a moment. "Tae-jun," he said. Fun. They didn't say anything else for a while. This was, she would think later, the strangest part. That the silence wasn't awkward. Most silences between strangers had a quality of tension, of obligation, of the mutual pressure to fill the air with words. This one was just quiet. She sat with her water. He sat with his drink. The bar moved around them at its ordinary pace. He asked her eventually if she was staying at the hotel. For the weekend, she said. Wedding? She turned to look at him. How did you... The dress earlier, and the way you looked at the orchids. A pause. Like they'd personally offended you. She laughed before she could stop herself. It came out abrupt and unguarded, and she covered it quickly, but it was already out there, genuine. Something she hadn't done in this city, this weekend, this version of her life in a while. It's not my wedding, she said. I gathered. I'm a bridesmaid. He looked at her. Are you close to the couple? And there it was. The question that had a true answer and a social answer. The true answer was no. I am not close to the couple. I am standing up in this wedding as a final act of dignity because I refuse to let them see me run, because Monique Harper was my best friend for 11 years, and she chose a man over 11 years, and I chose to be here because I will not give either of them the satisfaction of my absence. The social answer was something shorter. She looked at him and thought, for reasons she couldn't articulate, that this man would not be interested in the social answer. It's complicated, she said, and even that was more than she'd said to anyone about it in months. He nodded. He didn't push. He picked up his glass and drank and looked at the bar. The hotel treats its guests well, he said. You've been here before? I have business in the city. I stay here when I'm in Chicago. What kind of business? He glanced at her. Something moved behind his eyes. Not evasion exactly, more like the weighing of a decision. Import and export, he said. The way he said it, flat, neutral, with the slightest pause before it, told her that was the answer he gave to people he'd just met, and that the real answer was something he'd share or not share on a different timeline. She filed that away. Financial analysis, she said, for a firm in Hyde Park. He nodded. She thought about getting up. She thought about going back upstairs and changing out of the luncheon clothes and ordering room service and watching something on her laptop until she fell asleep at 9 p.m., which was what the sensible, self-protective version of her would do. Are you here for the rest of the afternoon? She asked instead. He looked at her. I have a call at 4. After that? She watched him process the question. He had a very controlled face, not cold exactly, but managed, the way the faces of certain people who operate in high-pressure environments get managed over time. But something in the question reached him. She could see it, not warmth exactly, but the recognition of something real. After that, he said, I have the evening. She picked up her water. There's apparently an excellent restaurant on the 31st floor, she said. I haven't eaten a meal I've actually tasted since I got here. The almost smile again. 7 o'clock, he said. 7, she agreed. She got up from her stool, picked up her bag, and walked out of the bar. At the entrance, she didn't look back, but she heard no movement from behind her, and she knew he was watching her go, and she did not particularly mind. But she went back to her room and stood in the center of it for a moment and looked at the garment bag and the bed and the view of the lake. Then she called her friend Camille. Camille picked up on the second ring, the way she always did, which was one of the reasons she was still in Zoraya's life when so many others weren't. Tell me you didn't throw the coffee at Monique, Camille said by way of greeting. I threw it at a stranger, Zoraya said. A pause. On purpose? By accident. I knocked it out of my own hand. He was standing there and I walked into him. He? There's a he? Zoraya sat on the edge of the bed. There is a he. On the wedding weekend? Z, you're out here writing your own story. I don't know anything about him. This was almost entirely true. She knew his name, she knew he had security, she knew he was staying in a hotel that charged $400 a night for a standard room, and that his clothes had the particular quality of very expensive things worn without thinking about them. She knew that the silence between them hadn't been uncomfortable, and that he had noticed she was in pain before she'd said a single word about it. That was something. That was, frankly, more than she knew about most people after considerably longer acquaintance. I'm having dinner with him, she said. Tonight? Tonight. Camille was quiet for a second, then, good. You're not going to tell me it's a bad idea? Is it a bad idea? Zoraya looked at the ceiling. I don't know yet. Then go find out. A pause. You've spent 12 months being okay. Maybe this weekend you get to be something else. She held on to that after she hung up, looked at the ceiling a little longer. Outside, Chicago was doing its late afternoon thing, the light shifting, the traffic changing character, the lake getting that particular evening quality that she had always loved about this city, the way the water held the light until the last possible moment. She got up and ran a shower and let herself be someone who was doing something impulsive for once. The restaurant on the 31st floor was called Lux, and it was extraordinary the way things are when expense is not a consideration. The kind of place where the menu didn't include prices, where the staff moved with a precision that felt choreographed, where the windows gave you the entire north side of the city spread out like an offering. Taejun was already there when she arrived at 7. He'd changed into a different shirt, still dark, still simple, but there was a jacket now, and when he stood when she approached the table it was an automatic reflex, not performed. His eyes moved over her once, taking in the simple black dress she'd chosen, the first thing in her bag that wasn't the bridesmaid dress. And he said nothing about it, which was the right response. They ordered. The food was exceptional. He didn't ask her anything she didn't want to answer. She didn't perform anything she didn't mean. It was, she would think afterward, the most honest 2 hours she'd spent in longer than she could remember. He didn't talk much about himself. What he gave her came in pieces, which she accepted without pushing. He'd been born in Seoul, had lived in Los Angeles for the past 6 years, traveled extensively, though he was oblique about why. He had no family, he mentioned. He watched her the way she'd noticed before, with that particular quality of attention that most people couldn't sustain, the kind that meant he was actually listening when she spoke, actually present, not running calculations behind his eyes about what to say next. She found herself telling him things. Not the whole story, not the full inventory of loss, but pieces of it. That she was here for someone else's wedding, that the relationship in question had complicated history, that she was doing the thing she was doing this weekend because walking away from it would have felt like losing twice. She hadn't said that last part out loud to anyone. He listened. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't offer perspective. He looked at her over the rim of his glass, and when she finished, he said, "You're here because you don't run from things." "Maybe," she said. "Not a judgment." He set his glass down. "It's one of the things I noticed." "In the lobby?" A hint of skepticism. "We were together for 30 seconds. 45, he said. "And you didn't look away when I looked at you. Most people do." She held his gaze now, deliberately. "Does that bother most people, the way you look at them?" "Yes." "It doesn't bother me." "I know," he said. "That's the other thing I noticed." The dessert came and went. The restaurant thinned out around them. Outside, the city did its glittering thing, all that light arranged against dark, the lake a black mirror beyond the grid. She didn't ask him what he actually did for work, not directly, but over the course of the dinner, certain things accumulated. The way the maitre d' had seated them in the best window position without a reservation, the way a man who was clearly not a hotel guest had stopped by their table early in the meal, murmured something in Korean, and departed without being introduced. The way Taejun carried himself in a room, as if the room was something he'd already assessed and categorized, and was now simply moving through. She was a financial analyst. She understood risk profiles. She understood that there were certain kinds of money and certain kinds of authority that didn't come from clean sources. She wasn't naive. She just found, sitting there, that she didn't particularly care in the way she probably should have. "The wedding is tomorrow afternoon," she said, near the end of the evening. He looked at her. "There's a reception after. Dinner and dancing and 400 people in a ballroom." She turned her water glass slowly on the tablecloth. "I was going to get through it by myself, but I think—" She stopped. "What do you think?" She looked at him. This was the moment where the sensible version of her would have laughed it off and said never mind and gotten up and thanked him for dinner. The sensible version. "I think having someone there who is actually on my side would make it considerably more survivable." He was quiet for a moment. Outside, a siren moved somewhere distant across the city and faded. "You want me to come," he said. "I want you to come." He picked up his water glass, drank, set it down. When he looked at her, the almost smile had become something more settled, more certain. "I was hoping you'd ask that," he said. And the way he said it, quiet, without drama, like a decision already made, told her he wasn't talking about the reception. She wasn't sure she was either. She found the orchids when she got back to her suite at 10:30. A full arrangement, white blooms in a black vase, sitting on the small table near the window. Against it, a hotel envelope. Inside, a note card, plain stock, black ink and handwriting that was angular and precise. In case you wanted to change your mind, that was all. No manipulation, no persuasion, just the option. Zariah stood at the window with the card and looked out at the city. The lights on the water, the traffic below, the Alderton's reflection sliding across the glass. Downstairs, somewhere in this hotel, Damian Cole was sleeping in a suite with the woman who had taken everything Zariah had spent 3 years building. In the morning, they were going to exchange vows in front of 400 people, and that was going to be what it was going to be. And tomorrow night, Kang Tae-jun was going to walk into that reception with her on his arm. She held the note card a moment longer, then set it on the table beside the orchids. She wasn't going to change her mind, but she was beginning to understand. Standing at the window of a hotel room in Chicago, 1 year after the worst thing that had ever happened to her, that some of the most consequential choices you ever made were the ones you couldn't explain and couldn't predict and couldn't have arrived at if everything before them hadn't gone so completely, terribly wrong. She had come to the city to survive a weekend. She had not come expecting to feel anything. She did not yet know what Tae-jun was, not really. She did not know the full shape of the world he moved through, the names of the men who flanked him, the weight of what he carried. She knew only that he had looked at her in the lobby like she was real, and bought her dinner without asking for anything, and sent her orchids with a note that gave her a way out instead of pressing her further in. She turned off the light near the window and crossed to the bed in the dark. Tomorrow she was going to put on an ivory dress and stand up in front of everyone she'd ever lost and hold herself together. And tomorrow night, she was going to find out who Kang Tae-jun was. She was, she realized as she pulled the covers up, more alive in this moment than she had been in 12 months. Outside, Chicago kept its lights on, the way it always did. The city that worked all night, that never quite went quiet, that kept moving forward regardless of what you'd left behind inside it. She was almost asleep when her phone buzzed once on the nightstand. She reached for it without sitting up. A text from a number she didn't have saved. 5 words. "Sleep well, Zariah." "I will." She stared at it for a moment. Then she put the phone down and closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, she did. She didn't know, lying there in the dark on the 14th floor, that 2 floors above her, Kang Tae-jun was standing at his own window looking at the same city, and that the phone call he'd taken at 4 that afternoon had not been about import and export at all, that it had been, instead, a conversation about a man who had recently made an enemy of the wrong people, and that the name of that man, repeated over a secure line in clipped Korean, was one she would recognize. She didn't know yet. By tomorrow night, she would. She woke at 6 a.m. without an alarm. The room was gray with early light, and for exactly 3 seconds she didn't remember where she was or what day it was. Then it came back. The hotel, the city, the ivory dress on the closet door, the text on her phone from a number she hadn't saved. She lay still for a moment with the ceiling above her and felt the day pressing down before it had even started. She picked up the phone. The text was still there. "Sleep well, Zariah. I will." She looked at it the way you look at evidence of something you're not sure yet whether to trust. Then she put the phone down and got up and went to the window. Chicago was doing its early morning thing, the lake catching the first flat light, the streets already carrying the particular energy of a city that doesn't really sleep so much as shift registers. From 14 floors up, it looked almost peaceful. She knew better. She'd grown up 2 hours south of this city and moved here at 22 and spent 7 years learning its specific grammar of ambition and disappointment. She made coffee from the in-room machine and drank it standing at the window and didn't let herself think about Tae-jun. She let herself think about the day instead. The ceremony at 2, the bridesmaids' prep starting at 10, the 400 people who would fill a ballroom and watch Damian Cole marry Monique Harper, while Zariah Brooks stood 6 feet away in an ivory dress and held a bouquet and smiled. She was going to be fine. She repeated it to herself the way you repeat something you need to be true. The bridal suite was louder than the day before. More people. Monique's college roommate had arrived overnight, and 2 of Damien's female cousins had materialized for reasons no one fully explained. And there was a photographer now, moving through the space with the professional invisibility of someone who understood that their job was to document without disturbing. Mrs. Harper was crying already, soft and continuous, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue and apologizing for it, which made it worse. Zarya arrived at 9:55. She'd left her hair down. Her edges were clean and her coils were defined, and she'd put on enough makeup to look intentional without looking like she was trying. She wore the ivory dress because that was what was required of her, and she wore it the way she wore everything, like it had been made for her specifically, like she'd chosen it herself. Monique saw her from across the room, and something flickered in her face. Pride, maybe. Or the particular discomfort of someone who had gotten everything they wanted and was only now beginning to suspect the cost. "You look beautiful," Monique said. "So do you," Zarya said. This was true. Monique was genuinely beautiful. Warm brown skin, wide eyes, a smile that had always been her best feature. Zarya had loved that smile for 11 years. She looked at it now the way you look at something through glass. They hugged. Brief, practiced. The photographer caught it. "How are you feeling?" Monique asked, pulling back but keeping her hands on Zarya's arms. "Ready," Zarya said. "How are you?" Terrified. Monique laughed, a little ragged. "Is that normal?" "I think so." They looked at each other for 1 second longer than the conversation required. Zarya watched Monique's eyes and saw the thing that was always there when they were alone. The guilt that Monique had never fully spoken out loud, never addressed directly, that lived in the space between them like furniture they'd both agreed to walk around. "I'm glad you're here," Monique said. Zarya said, "I know." She moved away toward the mirrors before either of them could say anything else. Damien came in at 11:30 to see the bride, which the photographer treated as a significant moment and the aunts treated as an invasion, and which Zarya treated as a test she intended to pass. She was standing near the window when he came in, wine glass in hand, laughing at something Bria had said. And she kept laughing, kept her body language loose and open, because she was not going to be the woman in the corner who stiffened when her ex-boyfriend walked in. He spoke to everyone. Moved around the room with the practiced ease of a man who knew how to work a space, kissed Monique carefully so as not to disturb her makeup, shook hands with the photographer like they were old friends. When he made his way to the window where Zarya was standing, it was gradual enough that it might have looked accidental to anyone not paying attention. "You look good," he said quietly. "Damien, you do. You look really good, Z." She looked at him steadily. "Don't do this today." "I'm not doing anything." "You're standing 6 inches closer than you need to be, and your voice just dropped." She kept her own voice even, almost friendly, because the photographer was 12 feet away. "Don't." He exhaled through his nose. A muscle moved in his jaw. He looked at the view the way people look at things when they're collecting themselves. "I want to talk to you, after the ceremony, before the reception. Just 5 minutes." "No." "Zarya, I have somewhere to be," she said. He turned to look at her. Something in his eyes, complicated, raw, the expression of a man who had made a calculation and was only now fully understanding what it had cost. "What does that mean?" "It means I have somewhere to be," she said. "Drink your champagne. It's your wedding day." She turned away from the window and went back to Bria and the conversation, and she didn't look at him again, and she didn't let her hand shake, and she was very glad that the wine glass gave her something to hold on to. The ceremony was in the hotel's grand ballroom, reconfigured for the occasion. Chairs arranged in precise rows. A floral arch that must have cost 4 figures, candles and light that turned everything soft and golden. 400 people filled the space. A string quartet played something Zarya didn't recognize. She walked down the aisle ahead of Monique, bouquet in both hands, chin level. She found a point at the far wall, and she walked toward it, and she did not make eye contact with anyone she recognized. She stood at her assigned position, and she breathed, slow and even, and she waited. Monique entered to something orchestral, and the room responded the way rooms respond at weddings, the collective intake of breath, the rustling, the reaching for phones. She was extraordinary in her dress. Even Zarya thought so. White silk, fitted through the bodice, a train that moved behind her like water. She walked alone. Her father had been absent since she was 16, and she'd made the decision herself. And she held her head up the whole way and looked at Damien like he was the only thing in the room. Damien watched her come down the aisle, and twice in the first 30 seconds, his eyes moved to Zarya. She caught it both times. She held her face still, expression neutral, eyes forward. The second time she looked directly back at him, let him see that she'd seen it, and watched the color change slightly in his face. She looked away first, which was not an act of surrender but of disinterest. The ceremony was 40 minutes. The vows were personal and specific, and Monique's voice cracked on the third sentence, and the room exhaled with her. Zoraya stood with her bouquet and her straight spine, and she let the words wash over her, and she thought about nothing in particular. The white orchids on her nightstand, the text on her phone, dinner on the 31st floor, a low voice saying 7 o'clock like it was already decided. When they kissed, the room erupted. Zarya clapped with everyone else. She was fine. The gap between the ceremony and the reception was 90 minutes, long enough for family photographs, for the newly married couple to be shuttled to various locations around the hotel for portraits, for guests to mill through the cocktail hour in the adjacent space. Zarya lasted 40 minutes at the cocktail hour. She spoke to Mrs. Harper, who was glowing now and no longer crying. She spoke to 2 of Damien's business associates who didn't know her history with him and were therefore tolerable. She ate a crab cake from a past tray, and it was excellent, and she noted that without pleasure. Then she went up to her room. She had an hour. She changed out of the bridesmaid dress, hung it on the door with a precision that was slightly aggressive, and she stood in the center of the room in her slip, and she breathed. Her phone showed a text from an unknown number. Not the same one as last night. Shorter, just, "Your table is ready when you are. TJ." She stared at it. He was already in the hotel, or had eyes in it. Either possibility said something about the nature of Kang Tae-jun that she had mostly set aside since last night. She was going to have to stop setting it aside. She sat on the edge of the bed and called Camille. "It's wedding day," Camille said. "How bad?" "The ceremony was fine. He looked at me twice during the vows." "Damien?" "Damien." Camille made a sound that was equal parts disgust and vindication. "And the other one? The mysterious import-export man?" "He's already in the hotel. He texted me." "What did it say?" "That my table is ready." Silence. Then, "Zoraya, he reserved a table." "I know." "At the reception he's not invited to." "I invited him last night." "To a reception at which your ex-boyfriend is the groom." "Yes." Another silence. "And you're calling me because..." "I'm calling you because I need someone to tell me this is either a terrible idea or a fine one." She pressed her palm flat on the bedspread. "I genuinely can't tell." Camille was quiet for a long moment. "What do you know about him?" "His name. That he's Korean, that he has security with him, that he paid for a dinner I couldn't afford without looking at the bill, that he listens when I talk." She paused. "That he made me laugh." "When did you last laugh? Actually, laugh?" Zoraya thought about it honestly. "A while." "Then here's my answer," Camille said. "You know what you know. You don't know everything else yet, but you know how tonight looks without him there. You've known that for weeks." A pause. "So the real question is whether the version of tonight you can have with him is worth whatever comes attached." Zarya looked at the window. Outside, the afternoon was going golden, the light doing what it did in October in Chicago. Slanted and amber and already thinking about winter. "I think it is," she said. "Then go put on your dress." She wore the black dress again. Not the bridesmaid dress, her own dress, the one she'd packed for this exact eventuality, without fully admitting to herself that was why she packed it. Simple, fitted, the kind of dress that didn't ask for anything from the room, but took everything the room had to offer. She did her makeup carefully and deliberately, not for anyone else, and by the time she was done, she looked like someone who intended to be exactly where she was. She took the elevator to the 31st floor. He was at the bar, not seated yet, standing with one hand on the counter and his phone in the other, and he'd changed too. A different jacket, darker, a shirt with no visible pattern that somehow looked expensive. One of his men was in position near the lobby entrance, a second near the elevator bank. He looked up when she came out of the elevator. She watched something move across his face. Not a performance, just a response. Brief and real, the way a person looks when they see something they were hoping to see. "You came," he said. "I said I would." He looked at her for another second. "You did." They went into the restaurant, the same table, the same window, the same spread of city below. The reception was 7 floors down. She could feel it, the bass register of the sound system, the mass of 400 people beginning to shift from cocktail hour to the main event. She had 30 minutes. I need to ask you something, she said, when the water had been poured and the menus had been set down and the waiter had retreated with appropriate professional discretion. He looked at her, waiting. The men with you, she said. Last night and today. The way the hotel responds to you. She held his gaze. What do you actually do? The restaurant murmured around them. Outside, a plane moved south over the lake. He was quiet for long enough that she thought he might deflect again. Then he said, What do you think I do? I think import and export is partially true, she said. I think the partial part is the part that requires security. He looked at her the way he'd looked at her in the lobby. That specific quality of attention, undiluted, unperforming, deciding something. I operate outside certain lines, he said. Which lines? Legal ones. She held that, sat with it, felt it settle into the understanding she'd already been building and recognized that it confirmed more than it surprised. How far outside, she said. Far. Are you dangerous? Yes. She believed him immediately, which was interesting. Most men who wanted you to think they were dangerous were not. Most men who were dangerous went to some length to obscure it. He'd said it flatly, without embellishment, the way you state a fact about yourself that you've long since stopped apologizing for. To me? She asked. He looked at her for a long moment. Something moved in his eyes. Something that was, she thought, the closest thing to vulnerability she would probably ever see in this particular face. No, he said. She picked up her water glass. Okay. That's it? You told me the truth when I asked, she said. That's more than most people do. She drank, set the glass down. And I'm a financial analyst who has been sitting in this hotel for 2 days pretending to support the man who spent 3 years of my life and the woman who helped him do it. She looked at the city. I'm not sure I'm in a position to judge anyone's relationship with consequence right now. He was quiet. Then, what happened with them? And she told him. The actual version this time. Not the compressed social story, not the performance of having moved on. The real one. She told him about 3 years with Damien, about the way she'd believed it was the kind of relationship you built a life inside, about Monique and the years of friendship and the phone call and the 7 months of silence. She told him about the engagement dinner and saying yes to bridesmaid before she could stop herself, about driving up to Chicago yesterday like she had something to prove to people who weren't paying attention. She told him all of it in 6 minutes, direct and without drama, and when she finished, her voice was completely level. He listened the entire time without moving. You're not over it, he said. Not an accusation, a reading. I'm over him, she said. I don't think you ever get over being betrayed by someone who was supposed to be your person. I think you just learn to carry it differently. He was quiet for a moment. The friend, he said. Monique. Yes. She asked you to be here. She did. And you came. I came. He turned his water glass once, slowly, on the tablecloth. Why? She thought about it honestly. Because I refused to disappear, she said. Because if I wasn't here, it would mean they'd taken that too. My right to exist in rooms I was already in. He looked at her for a long time. Something in his face had shifted. Not soft, exactly, but open. The way very controlled things look when they briefly relax their hold. You're not what I expected, he said. What did you expect? I didn't expect anything. I don't usually... He stopped. A pause. I don't usually have dinner with people I meet in lobbies. Neither do I. And yet, she agreed. Downstairs, the bass register deepened. The reception was getting underway. She looked at the window and felt the last 48 hours pressing down. The luncheon, the ceremony, Damien's eyes during the vows, the orchids on her nightstand. She felt the weight of the ivory dress still somehow on her body, even though she wasn't wearing it anymore. I need to go down, she said. He reached for his jacket on the chair behind him. She stood. He stood. They were close, the width of the table between them, and she was aware of the specific quality of that proximity. Not threatening, but with a gravity to it, a pull. You don't have to do this, she said. He looked at her. Do you want me to? She held his gaze. Yes. Then I'm doing it. They took the elevator down. The ballroom doors were open. The sound hit them before the visual. Music, voices, the specific noise of 400 people eating and drinking and being socially performative in an enclosed space. Through the doors, she could see the circular tables, the centerpieces, the dance floor already lit. The head table at the far end, where Monique sat luminous in white and Damien sat beside her in his tuxedo. Zoraya stopped just outside the entrance. Taejun stopped beside her. She was aware of his men repositioning, one inside already, one at the door. The geometry of protection reconfigured around this new space without discussion or visible direction. She was aware of a few things happening to her body simultaneously. Her heart rate elevated, her jaw slightly tight, her hands wanting to do something they had nowhere to do. Taejun stood beside her. He didn't touch her, didn't rush her. He looked at the room with the same calm assessment he'd looked at everything else, an environment, a set of factors, something to be understood, and then moved through. "Ready?" he said. She looked at the head table, at Damien, who was leaning toward Monique, saying something, at the 200 people between the door and the life she used to have. "Yes," she said. He put his hand on the small of her back, not possessive, not performative, just present. A point of contact, light and certain, that said, "I'm here," without any of the noise that phrase usually carried. They walked in. The room didn't stop. Not immediately, but something moved through it, a shift in attention, a ripple, the way a room changes when something enters it that the room was not expecting. People near the entrance registered him first, then the people those people were sitting near, a ripple moving outward from the door. Business leaders, she would understand later. Men who recognized the name, the face, the specific architecture of the authority he carried. People for whom Kang Taejun was not a stranger. She felt the moment Damien saw them. She didn't look at him directly. She didn't need to. She felt the shift in the room's attention vector, the way 400 people's social antennae triangulated toward a point, and she kept her chin level and her back straight, and she walked beside Taejun toward the table that had apparently been arranged in the middle of everything, and she felt, for the first time all weekend, like herself. Entirely, completely, dangerously herself. They sat. A waiter appeared immediately. Across the room, at the head table, Damien Cole had gone very still, and Monique, whose eyes moved with the professional precision of a woman who tracked social dynamics for a living, had noticed her new husband's stillness, and was now looking at exactly what had caused it. Zoraya picked up her wine glass. She did not look at either of them. Taejun said something quiet to the waiter, and the waiter nodded and disappeared, and then he turned to her, unhurried, and said, "You're breathing." "I'm breathing," she confirmed. "Good." He picked up his own glass. "Don't stop." She almost laughed. The almost laugh did something to the tension in her chest, not dissolved it, but changed its character, made it something she could hold rather than something that was holding her. Across the room, the best man was on his feet, microphone in hand, working up to a toast. And at the head table, Damien had leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table, his eyes fixed on the two figures in the center of the room, with an expression that was no longer careful, no longer managed, that was, for the first time all weekend, completely, nakedly unguarded. Zoraya felt it like heat. She reached for her wine and drank and kept her eyes forward and thought, 48 hours to get through this. She was now no longer sure that was enough time. Because something in the room had changed the moment they walked in. Some axis had shifted. Some irreversible thing had been set in motion. And she could feel it in the way Taejun sat beside her, calm and absolute, like a man who had already calculated 3 steps ahead and was simply waiting for the board to catch up. And across the room, from the direction of the head table, she heard Monique's laugh. Bright, social, performed. And beneath it, just barely, the particular quality of a woman who had just seen something she hadn't expected to see. Zoraya heard it. That laugh. The specific frequency of it, too bright, too fast, the kind of laugh that was really a recalibration, a woman buying herself 3 seconds to decide how to respond to a threat she hadn't mapped yet. She didn't turn to look. She took another sip of wine and kept her eyes on the best man, who was telling a story about Damien in college that the room was receiving with appropriate warmth. She was aware of Taejun beside her. Not tense, not performing, just present the way a wall is present, solid and without agenda. The toast ended. The room applauded. Damien lifted his glass. His eyes, over the rim of it, found her directly. She held it, didn't smile, didn't look away. Just let him see her, sitting where she was, beside who she was beside, in the dress she'd chosen for herself. And then she turned back to her own glass, deliberately, like he was a detail she'd assessed and set aside. Beside her, so quiet she almost missed it, Taejun said, "He's been looking at you for 4 minutes." "I know," Does it bother you? She thought about that honestly. Less than it should, she said. He nodded once, didn't pursue it. The dinner service began. The room shifted into its eating and talking configuration, the noise level rising, the social pressure redistributing across 400 people in a way that gave individuals more cover. Zariah let herself breathe more fully. She ate, actually tasted the food this time, a cedar-planked salmon that was genuinely good. And she and Taejun talked quietly in the way they'd talked the night before, without performance, without the usual social lubrication of people getting to know each other, just direct and real. She asked him about Seoul. He told her about the Han River at 3 in the morning, the particular silence of it, the way the city looked from the water when most of it was asleep. He said it the way people say things they haven't thought about in a while, carefully, like the words were stored somewhere dusty. She was so deep in that conversation, in the specific gravity of his voice, and the candlelight, and the 60 seconds of peace she'd carved out of this terrible weekend, that she didn't notice Damien stand up from the head table. She didn't notice him move through the room. She noticed him when he was 4 feet away. What? He stopped at the edge of their table. He'd been drinking, not drunk. Damien never got drunk in public, but looser than usual, the careful management of his social presentation fractionally failing. His bow tie was still on. His jacket wasn't. "Can I have a word?" he said to Zariah. Not a question. She looked up at him, set her fork down with a quietness that cost her something. "Not right now. It'll take 2 minutes." "Damien," her voice was completely level. "You're at your wedding reception." "I'm aware of what I'm at." His jaw was tight. His eyes moved briefly to Taejun, and something happened in his face. A tightening, a reassessment, the expression of a man who has walked into a room and understood immediately that the geometry is wrong. He looked back at Zariah. 2 minutes. Taejun hadn't moved, hadn't changed his posture or his expression. He was looking at Damien with the same calm he brought to everything, which was somehow more unsettling than aggression would have been. He said nothing. Zariah looked at Damien and made a decision. "Fine," she said. She stood. Taejun's eyes moved to her face. She met them briefly. "I'm okay," and followed Damien through a side door off the ballroom into a carpeted hallway that smelled like hotel cleaning products and recirculated air. The door swung shut behind them. The music became muffled. Damien turned to face her. In the hallway light, stripped of the ballroom's flattering warmth, he looked tired. More tired than she'd noticed inside. The lines around his mouth were deeper than they'd been a year ago. "Who is he?" Damien said. "That's what you wanted to ask me." "Answer the question." "Someone I met," she said. "Someone who isn't your business." "In my hotel?" "Your hotel." She kept her voice down, but the edge in it was real. "Monique's wedding hotel, which I was invited to, where I have every right to be with whoever I want." She looked at him. "What did you actually want to say to me, Damien? Because if it's about him, you can keep it." He ran a hand over his face. That gesture, she'd seen it 1,000 times. It meant he was working up to something he'd rehearsed. "I made a mistake." The air in the hallway went very still. I know it's late. I know it doesn't." He stopped. "But I need you to know I know it. I made the worst mistake of my life, and I have to live inside it every single day and tonight. Watching you walk in there with..." He stopped again. His voice had gotten rougher. "You looked freezy. You looked like someone had let you out." She stood very still. She waited until she was sure she had herself, and then she said, "You don't love me, Damien." "That's not..." "You love the life you threw away," she said. "You love the version of yourself that existed when I was in it. You love that you had something, and you let it go, and you can't get it back." She kept her voice even. "But you don't love me. You don't actually know me anymore. And the man who did know me, who had 3 years of me, chose Monique, chose the baby, chose the story he wanted to tell people about being a family man. So..." She picked up her chin. "You don't get to stand in a hallway at your wedding reception and tell me it was a mistake. That's not for you. That's mine." He looked at her. Something in his face broke and reformed, broke and reformed. "Go back to your wife," she said. She turned and opened the door. She was 3 steps back into the ballroom when she became aware of the shift. It was subtle at first, the change in the noise level, the particular quality of attention moving through a crowd. She scanned the room automatically, and her eyes went to the head table, and she understood. Monique was not at the head table. She looked toward her seat. Taejun was there, still, watching her with a focus that meant he'd already read the room. She moved toward him and leaned down slightly and said quietly, "Where did Monique go?" He looked toward the door through which Zoraya had just returned. "She followed you both out approximately 90 seconds after you left," he said. "She came back 40 seconds ago. She went to the east side corridor." Zoraya straightened up. She looked at the east side of the ballroom, a door there, half concealed by a floral arrangement. She could see it from here, the faint light of a corridor beyond it, and in that corridor the edge of a white dress. Still there, standing still. Which meant Monique had been in that corridor while Zoraya was in the other one, and the corridors connected at the back of the ballroom. Which meant Monique had heard. Zarya stood motionless for 3 seconds and calculated exactly how much of that conversation had been audible. "I made a mistake. All of it." She went to the east corridor because she couldn't not. Monique was standing with her back against the wall, her bouquet abandoned on a console table beside her, her arms crossed. She was still beautiful, the dress still immaculate, the makeup still intact, the physical fact of her unchanged. But something had gone out of her face. The warmth, the bride brightness, the performance of the happiest day. It had dropped the way a stage light drops when someone cuts the power. She looked at Zoraya when she came through the door. Neither of them said anything for a moment. "How much?" Zoraya said. Monique's mouth pressed flat. "Enough." "Monique, don't." Her voice was very quiet and very hard. "Don't do the thing where you make this reasonable. I'm not interested in reasonable right now." Zoraya stopped moving. She stood in the corridor with the muffled sound of 400 people celebrating on the other side of the wall and looked at the woman she'd known for 11 years. "I didn't ask him to say that," she said. "I know you didn't." Monique's voice cracked on the last word. She pressed her lips together, recovered. "That's almost worse. You didn't have to do anything. You just existed. You walked in there with whoever that man is and you sat down and you existed and he—" She stopped. "It's been 7 months, Zoraya. We have a son. 7 months and he still can't—" She turned away, put one hand on the wall. Her shoulders were shaking and she was fighting it. Zarya stood there and felt the complicated truth of her own position. She had not asked for this, had not engineered it, had not come here to destroy anything. She had come here to survive. And survival had somehow still managed to burn everything down. "What do you want me to say?" Zoraya asked. Monique turned back. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. "Tell me it's over. Tell me you're done with him. Tell me what's in that hallway is the last—" "I was never in that hallway because I want him back," Zoraya said. "Then why—" "Because he needed to hear what I said, and I needed to say it." Her voice was steady. "I'm not in love with Damien. I haven't been in love with Damien, but I was owed those words, Monique. I was owed them for 12 months, and tonight I said them." She held the other woman's gaze. "That's all that happened." Monique looked at her for a long time. Something moved in her face. A calculation. A reorientation. The way someone looks when they're building a new architecture out of rubble. "Who is he?" Monique said. Quieter now. "The man at your table." "Someone I met." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have right now." Monique looked toward the wall as if she could see through it to the ballroom. "He's not nobody," she said. The way people looked when he walked in, Marcus, Damien's business partner, Marcus was at the table near the door. She stopped. Marcus went white. I saw it from the head table. He went white and leaned over to his wife and said something, and she picked up her phone. Zoraya was very still. "Who is he?" Monique asked again. "I don't know everything about him," Zoraya said. And that was the truth. She knew the shape of it. She didn't know the specifics. Monique made a sound that wasn't a laugh. "Of course," she looked at the bouquet on the console table. "Of course you walk in here on my wedding day with someone who makes Marcus Chen go white." She pressed a hand briefly to her own forehead. "Is it safe?" "Are you—" "I'm safe," Zoraya said. "You don't know that. Monique." She said her name the way she used to say it. Before, when they were real to each other. It worked. The other woman looked at her. "I'm safe. Go back to your reception." Monique looked at her for a long moment. And then quietly she said, "I know I don't have the right to say this. I know what I did. I know there isn't a version of this where I'm not the one who broke it. Her voice was very low. But I miss you. I miss my friend, and I know I'm the one who killed her, and I have to live with that, and I do, every day. But tonight, standing in this corridor, she stopped. Zaria felt something move in her chest, old and deep and still raw in the specific way that some wounds never fully close. I know, she said. I know, she said again, but we can't. Not tonight. Not here. Monique nodded. Her chin came up. The performance reformed around her, the bride brightness coming back because it had to. Because there were 400 people on the other side of that wall, and the night was not over. Go be with your person, Monique said. Her voice was even now, but the effort of it was visible. Whoever he is. Zaria turned toward the door. She put her hand on it. Behind her, Monique said, very quietly, He told me, 6 weeks ago. He told me he still dreamed about you. Zaria's hand stopped on the door. The corridor was very quiet. I thought you should know that, Monique said, because I think you believed tonight that you were done. And I think you were. But I don't think he is. And that man at your table is not someone who tolerates complications. The door opened. She walked back into the ballroom, and the noise and the light hit her like a physical thing. She crossed the floor toward her table, and she sat down, and Tae-jun looked at her face and said nothing. She picked up her wine. Her hand was completely steady, which surprised her. I need to tell you something, she said. He waited. Damien, the groom, told me tonight that being with me was a mistake. The one he made. She looked at the tablecloth. His wife overheard it, some of it. She looked up. And she told me something before I came back and that... She stopped. Tell me, he said. He still dreams about me. Damien told her, 6 weeks ago. The room moved around them. The music had shifted to something slower. 2 couples had moved to the dance floor. Tae-jun was quiet for a moment. And, he said, and nothing. I don't want him back. That's not what this is. She turned to face him fully. I'm telling you because you should know what you walked into. The full version. He looked at her. You're warning me. I'm being honest with you. He was quiet again. He turned his glass once on the table. When he looked back up, something had shifted in his face. Not cold, not angry, but settled in a way that was different from the restaurant version of him. More deliberate. There's something I should have told you before tonight, he said. The music continued. The dance floor had more couples now. Somewhere near the entrance, she heard a raised voice quickly hushed. The call I took yesterday afternoon, he said. The 4 o'clock. She waited. There was a name mentioned in that call. He held her eyes. A man in Chicago who has made a specific kind of enemy, the kind that requires resolution. The tablecloth had a very fine weave. She could see it clearly in the candlelight. What kind of resolution? She said. The permanent kind. The room continued around them. The dance floor spun. Someone was clinking a glass near the head table. Another toast coming. And the name, she said. Tae-jun looked at her without flinching. Damien Cole, he said. The clinking reached its peak. 400 people raised their glasses. The room filled with the sound of celebration. Zaria sat completely still with her wine glass in her hand and felt the floor of the evening open up beneath her. And she understood, in the particular clarity that comes when multiple terrible things become simultaneously true, that she had walked into this ballroom tonight with the man who had come to Chicago to kill her, ex-boyfriend. The word formed and didn't form. Her brain rejected the sentence the way a body rejects something toxic, tried to restructure it, couldn't. 400 people were applauding around her. Someone near the head table was laughing. Tae-jun was watching her face with the stillness of a man who has delivered information before and knows how to wait for it to land. She set the wine glass down. Carefully. The way you set things down when your hands are no longer entirely reliable. Say that again, she said. The contract came through a sole intermediary, he said. Low, unhurried, the voice he used when he was giving her only facts. The name was Damien Cole, Chicago, financial sector. A pause. I didn't know who he was to you. I didn't know you existed until yesterday. The tablecloth. She looked at it again. The fine weave. The candlelight moving across it. And last night, she said. Dinner. I came for work. And you're telling me now because you told me the truth in the corridor, he said. And I owe you the same. She looked up at him. His face was exactly what it always was. Composed, direct, without performance. Nothing about this moment had changed the fundamental quality of him, which was somehow the most disorienting part of all of it. "Is it done?" she said. "The contract." "No." "When?" He was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. "It was scheduled for tonight, after the reception." The music changed. Something with a beat now, the dance floor filling with people who had eaten and drunk enough to stop being self-conscious. Near the entrance, she could see Damien moving through the room, working the crowd the way he always did. Hand on a shoulder here, a laugh there, the practiced warmth of a man who understood that social capital was just another asset class to manage. Alive. Moving through his own wedding reception, completely unaware. "Who hired you?" she said. "That I can't tell you. Can't or won't. Both." She was very cold. The ballroom was warm, the heat of 400 bodies, the lighting, the season, but something had drained out of her in the last 60 seconds that left her cold at her center. She recognized the feeling. It was the same one she'd had on the kitchen floor after Damien's phone call, the particular cold of the ground moving. "If I hadn't been here," she said, "if you hadn't met me, if I hadn't been his ex, it would be done already," he said. She absorbed that. "And now?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Now I'm sitting at a table at his wedding reception telling his ex-girlfriend the truth." Something moved in his face. Not apology. Something harder. "Which is not something I have done before." "Why?" "You know why." She did know. She wished she didn't because knowing made this more complicated in a way she didn't have room for right now, but she knew. She looked at the dance floor and watched Damien Cole move through his own party, this man who had destroyed 2 years of her life, who had dreamed about her 6 weeks ago and confessed it to his wife, who had pulled her into a hallway tonight and said, "I made a mistake like that meant something." She thought about Monique in the East Corridor, white dress, wet eyes, saying that man at your table is not someone who tolerates complications. She thought about Elias, 7 months old, a boy named Elias who had Damien's jaw and Monique's eyes and had not asked for any of this. She turned back to Taejun. "Cancel it," she said. His eyes held steady on hers. "Zoraya, I know what I'm asking." Her voice was quiet and completely certain. "Cancel it. There are people I answer to. The contract isn't... I don't care." She leaned forward slightly. "There is a 7-month-old in this city who needs his father alive. I don't care what Damien did to me. I don't care what he did to deserve whatever he got himself into. I care that a child doesn't lose his father at a wedding reception because I spent 2 days not asking enough questions." She held his eyes. "Cancel it." The room moved around them. The bass from the sound system moved through the floor, through the table, through her bones. Taejun was quiet for 5 full seconds. "There will be consequences," he said. "For me." "I understand that." "You don't. Not fully." "I understand enough." She didn't move, didn't look away. "What do you need from me?" Something shifted in him. Not breaking. Nothing about Kang Taejun broke cleanly. But a reorientation, a choice being made in real time with the weight of it fully visible on his face for the first and possibly last time. He reached into his jacket, withdrew his phone, typed something in Korean, fast, 3 lines, and sent it. Then he put the phone on the table between them. "It's suspended," he said. "I'm not canceled. I don't have the authority to cancel unilaterally." "What's the difference?" "Suspended means no action tonight. It means I've told my intermediary there's a complication. It means..." He looked at the phone. "It means I have approximately 72 hours before the people above me start asking questions I can't deflect." "And after 72 hours?" "After 72 hours," he said, "we have a different problem." The bass continued. The dance floor spun. Somewhere near the head table, Monique was watching them. Zaria felt it. That gaze tracking across the room. "He has to know," she said. "Damien has to know he's a target." "If he knows," Taejun said, "he'll run, or he'll do something worse. He'll go to the wrong people. And when the wrong people start moving, then what? Then the 72 hours becomes 6. She pressed both palms flat on the table. Her mind was running, the way it ran at work when a model was collapsing and she had 20 minutes to find the error, the particular quality of fast, cold thinking that was the best thing she had. Variables. Constraints. What she controlled, what she didn't. "Who hired you?" she said again. "Zoraya. He clearly owes someone something. Money, probably. His business is..." She stopped. looked at the dance floor where Damien was now actually dancing, loose and easy, a man without a care. His business is in private equity. I know his firm. I know his partners. If I can find the liability, I can potentially find the leverage. Something to give them other than... She stopped. Taejun was looking at her with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. Not quite surprise. Something closer to the way you look at someone who has just done something that adjusts your entire estimation of them. You're trying to solve this, he said. Someone has to. You have no idea what world you're describing. I have a pretty good idea, she said. I'm a financial analyst who spent 3 years watching Damien Cole operate. I know what his deals look like on paper. I know which partners he has and which ones make him nervous. She looked at him directly. Help me find out who hired you, and I will find you the thread that unravels the reason. The music was very loud now. The room had reached that point in a wedding reception where the last inhibitions had dissolved and the dance floor was genuinely full, and the overhead lights had dimmed and the whole space had shifted into something looser, warmer, less structured. Taejun looked at her for a long moment. Park, he said to the room, just loudly enough. One of the suited men materialized at his shoulder within 4 seconds. Taejun spoke to him in Korean, brief, fast, a set of instructions that Zaraya couldn't follow but could feel the shape of. Park nodded once and moved away. What did you tell him? She asked. To get the car, and to bring me the file I have on Cole's financials. He looked at her. I looked into him before I came to Chicago. It's standard. She stared at him. You have a file. I always have a file. And you sat across from me for 2 evenings. I didn't know he was yours when I built the file, he said. And then I did know. And I was trying to determine how to... He stopped. For the first time, she watched him not complete a sentence, which was such an anomaly that it told her everything. It wasn't handled well, he said. No, she agreed. It wasn't. They looked at each other. The music swelled. Around them, the wedding reception continued its beautiful, indifferent momentum. We need somewhere quiet, she said, to look at the file. He stood. She stood. He straightened his jacket with that single, precise motion and looked at her across the table. We have to go through the lobby. My car is in the east garage. I know this hotel, she said. Follow me. She took him through the service corridor. She'd found it the previous morning when she'd needed to get from the bridal suite to the lobby without walking through a crowd. And they moved through the hotel's back infrastructure. The laundry staging area, the kitchen loading dock corridor, the secondary elevator bank that the staff used. Taejun moved through it without comment, without slowing, his pace matching hers exactly. Park and one other man fell in behind them, close enough to be useful, far enough to give the illusion of privacy. The east garage was cold after the ballroom. The concrete smell, the orange-tinted lighting, the specific quiet of a structure designed for cars. Taejun's vehicle was a black Mercedes, long wheelbase, backed into a far corner stall with a sightline to both exits. Of course it was. Park produced a black document folder from the trunk. Taejun took it without opening it and opened the rear door of the car. Zaraya got in. The door closed. The garage sounds went muffled. Taejun got in the other side and opened the folder on the seat between them. It was comprehensive. She'd worked with enough financial documentation to recognize the depth of it immediately. Not surface-level research, not a Google summary. Bank structures, shell company registrations, a flow chart of equity positions that someone had drawn by hand in precise lines. Wire transfer records that she was fairly certain had been obtained in a way that no legitimate data service would describe. She pulled the flow chart toward her and looked at it under the door's reading light. Here, she said, after 90 seconds. Her finger landed on a name in the chain. Vertex Pacific Holdings. That's... She moved her finger along the line. That's a Cayman structure with a sole registration. What is that? A fund, he said. Private. 3 investors. Who are the 3? He reached into the folder and produced a separate page. Names. She looked at them. 2 she didn't recognize. The 3rd she did. Harrison Lyle. She sat back. You know that name, Taejun said. He's Damien's silent partner, she said. Has been since the firm launched. She stopped. Reorganized. He's also under SEC investigation. Has been for 8 months. It was quiet. I know because I follow that sector, and there were whispers, nothing public. But if Damien's firm is capitalized through a Lyle vehicle, and Lyle is under investigation, Cole would be exposed, Tae-jun said. Massively. His entire fund structure potentially collapses. Criminal liability if the SEC decides to go there. She looked at the flowchart again. But that's not why someone hires. She stopped, chose her words. That's a financial problem. You don't solve a financial problem this way unless. She turned to look at him. Unless Damien knows something, not just about the fund, about Lyle specifically. Tae-jun was quiet. He knows something Lyle can't afford to have said out loud, she said. And Lyle. She looked at the page with the 3 names. Which one is above Lyle? He looked at the page. He said a name she'd never heard. Korean? She asked. Yes. Connected to you. A pause. Adjacent, he said. She understood what that meant. So the order comes from above Lyle, she said. Through your network. To you. She looked at the folder in her lap. And Damien doesn't know any of this. He thinks this is a bad week, a hard marriage, and an ex-girlfriend at his reception. Most people don't know when they've become a problem, Tae-jun said. She looked at the garage wall. Somewhere above them, in a ballroom on the 3rd floor, 400 people were dancing. What does Damien know about Lyle? She said. Specifically. That I can't tell you. Can't, because I genuinely don't know, he said. I was given a target and a timeline, not a reason. She looked at him. But you could find out. It would take time I've told you I don't have. 72 hours, she said. Less now. She ran her hands over the documents in her lap. Her mind was doing the thing it did at the edge of a big risk. That particular quality of clarity that came when the stakes were high enough that the noise dropped away, and only the core variables remained. If I can get Damien to give me his documentation on Lyle, she said slowly. The real documentation, not the clean version. Whatever he's been holding as insurance, because that's what it is, it has to be. Then we have something to trade. Something that makes Damien less dangerous to Lyle as a living witness than as a dead one. She stopped. If Lyle has the documents, the incentive disappears. Tae-jun looked at her for a long moment. You're describing negotiating with people who don't negotiate. I'm describing giving them what they already want, she said. The liability is the information Damien holds. Give them the information voluntarily, neutralize the threat. Damien walks. Lyle gets what he needs. The order evaporates. And if Damien won't give you the documentation, she was quiet for a second. He will, she said. If he understands what tonight actually is. You're going to tell him. I'm going to tell him enough. Tae-jun looked at the garage wall. His jaw was set. She watched the calculation move through him. The costs, the angles, the risks. The part of him that operated in clean lines and defined territories and understood contracts as absolute. And the other part, the one she'd been talking to for 2 days. If this goes wrong, he said, if Damien panics, if he runs, I know. Then the 72 hours is gone and I can't protect either of you. I understand that. Zoraya. He turned to look at her fully. His voice had dropped. Not soft. It was never soft, but with a different quality, something that came from somewhere below the professional register. If this goes wrong, I am the one they'll send next. Do you understand that? Not a stranger. Me. The garage was very quiet. She looked at him, at his face, the composed architecture of it, the tattoo climbing his neck, the eyes that had been straight with her from the first moment she'd actually asked. The man who had come to Chicago to do a specific terrible thing and had instead sent her orchids and told her the truth over dinner. Then let's make sure it doesn't go wrong, she said. He held her gaze for another second. Then he closed the folder. You have 1 hour, he said. I'll have Park positioned at both exits. If Damien's behavior changes, if he makes any call, if he tries to leave with anyone I don't recognize, I know. And when you're done, you bring me whatever he gives you. We go through it tonight. If there's enough, he stopped. If there's enough, she finished, you make a call. Yes. She put her hand on the door handle. Her heart was beating very hard and very steadily, the way it did when she was making a decision she couldn't unmake. One more thing, she said. He waited. If you had met me before this weekend, she said, not here, somewhere else. No contract, no Damien, no all of it. Just you and me in a room somewhere. She held his eyes. Would you still have had dinner with me? He looked at her for a moment that stretched long enough to mean something. Yes, he said, without question. She opened the door and got out into the cold concrete air of the garage and felt the weight of everything ahead of her settle across her shoulders. She had to go back into that ballroom. She had to find Damian Cole, and she had to make him understand, in language that couldn't be misread, that the worst night of his life was still in front of him unless he gave her what she needed. She had to do it quietly, in plain sight of 400 guests, including his wife, without raising an alarm that could bring the whole structure down before she had time to build a replacement. She had done harder things. She was not sure when or how, but she was committed to the belief that she had. She was 20 feet from the garage door back to the hotel when her phone rang. Unknown number. Not the one from Tae-jun. Different area code. Los Angeles. She stopped, looked at it, answered. Ms. Brooks. A man's voice. Older. Measured in the way of someone accustomed to being obeyed. I think we should have a conversation before you go back inside. My name is Harrison Lyle, and I believe you've just been reading some documents that belong to me. She stood in the garage and did not move and let the voice settle into her like cold water. I'm going to need you to tell me how you have this number, she said. Ms. Brooks. Lyle's voice had the particular patience of someone who had been waiting for this conversation and wasn't particularly concerned about how she received it. You're standing in the east parking structure of the Alderton Grand Hotel. You're holding a black document folder that belongs to a man currently sitting in the rear seat of a Mercedes registered to a shell company in Macau. You have been inside that vehicle for approximately 11 minutes. A pause. I know your number because I know everything about everyone in proximity to my interests. That's how I've stayed alive long enough to make the kind of enemies who hold weddings in $400 a night hotels. Her hand tightened on the phone. What do you want? She said. To offer you a choice before you do something that can't be undone. His voice was almost gentle. Go back inside. Sit down. Finish your wine. Leave Chicago tomorrow morning and return to your apartment in Hyde Park and your career at Meridian Capital. And this weekend will be nothing more than an unpleasant social obligation you survived. A pause that had weight in it. Or keep moving in the direction you're moving, and discover that the world Kang Tae-jun operates in is not one that allows for exit. She looked at the door to the hotel. Orange light, concrete smell. Somewhere above her, 400 people were still dancing. You had someone follow us out of the ballroom, she said. I had someone in the ballroom before the reception started. Why? Because Tae-jun is efficient, but he's not infallible. And I wanted eyes on the timeline. A pause. I didn't anticipate you. Nobody does, she said. A beat. Something that might, in a different man, have been a small laugh. No, I can see that. His voice shifted, still controlled, but something slightly different underneath it. You're not afraid of me. I'm very afraid of you, she said. I'm just not letting that make my decisions. Silence on the line. The documentation, she said. What Damian holds on you. That's what this is about. Partially. What's the other part? The other part is a conversation I had 3 years ago with a man who is now a federal witness in a case that doesn't have my name on it yet. The voice was still even. Damian Cole was present for that conversation. He documented it. I've known for 14 months. I've been patient. A pause. My patience has a ceiling. She walked slowly to the concrete pillar nearest her and put her back against it. Her mind was running hard. Variables, positions, what she had and what she didn't. He doesn't know you know, she said. No. So tonight was never about the money, the fund, the SEC investigation. That's cover. The fund is a real problem, Lyle said, but solvable. The recording is not. Recording. She filed that. Adjusted the model. If I bring you the recording, she said, you walk away. If the recording is authentic and complete, yes. And Damian lives out his life in whatever domestic disappointment he's currently constructing. A pause. I'm not sentimental, but I'm also not indiscriminate. I only want what threatens me. She breathed, in and out, the garage air cold in her lungs. Give me 2 hours, she said. You have one, Lyle said. After that, the complication resolves itself the original way. The line went dead. She stood against the pillar for exactly 10 seconds. Then she turned and walked back to the Mercedes. Tae-jun was out of the car before she reached it. He'd seen her face through the garage's dim light, and he was already moving. Not panicked, that wasn't a thing he did, but alert in the full-body way of someone whose instincts had just fired. Who called you? He said. Lyle. The word landed. She watched it hit him. The reassessment, fast and complete behind his eyes. He has someone in the building, he said. Yes, he knew about the folder, the car, the 11 minutes. She looked at him. He wants the recording Damien made 3 years ago, not the financial documentation. A recording of a conversation where Lyle said something that would put him in federal range. She paused. He gave me 1 hour. Taejun was quiet for 2 seconds. He called you directly. Yes. Which means he's decided you're the operative piece. His jaw was tight. He's using you to get to Cole because going through me now is too visible. I know. If you go back in there and you get the recording from Damien and you hand it to Lyle, he said, slowly, working it out in front of her. Lyle has what he wants. The contract disappears. But you have also just helped a man destroy evidence in a federal investigation. She held his gaze. I know that too. That's obstruction. Potentially worse depending on the recording's contents. I know. He looked at her. Zariah, I also know, she said, that if I don't go back in there, Damien Cole dies tonight in a parking structure or a service elevator or the back of a car on the way to his honeymoon hotel, and his son grows up without a father, and Monique... She stopped. And whatever Monique did to me, she does not deserve that. And Elias definitely doesn't. Taejun was very still. There's a third option, she said. She'd built it in the 60 seconds between the pillar and the car. It was not a clean option. It had costs she hadn't fully calculated and risks she couldn't fully map. But it was there. The recording, she said, Damien made it as insurance, which means he has a copy somewhere that isn't on his person, cloud storage, a lawyer, somewhere. If I get him to tell me where the original is, we give Lyle a copy, something that satisfies him enough to pull back tonight. She held up a hand before Taejun could speak. Not the real original. A copy. Clean enough to pass initial verification. It buys us 48 hours. To do what? To get the real recording to the FBI. The words sat between them in the cold garage air. Taejun looked at her with an expression she had not seen on his face before. You're asking me to help you route evidence to federal investigators. I'm asking you to help me make sure a man lives through his wedding night. She looked at him directly. The FBI gets the recording, Lyle becomes their problem, the contract is moot because the leverage is gone. Lyle can't unring that bell by having Damien killed. It's already in federal hands. And my name? Doesn't have to be anywhere in it, she said. Damien thinks he's protecting himself. I'm the conduit. She stopped. You're not in this part. He looked at her for a long moment. His face was doing the thing it had done twice before. That internal reckoning, fully visible for someone who was watching closely enough. The man who operated outside certain lines, standing at the exact boundary of one of them. Park, he said. Park appeared from the shadows near the exit. Taejun spoke to him in Korean. 4 sentences. Park looked at Zariah once, not hostile, just assessing, and then moved away toward the hotel entrance. What did you tell him? She said. To find Lyle's man in the building and keep him visible without engagement. He looked at her. You have the hour. Use it. She turned toward the hotel door. Zariah. She stopped. If Damien doesn't give you the recording, he said. His voice was flat and certain. If he panics or runs or tries to involve the hotel security, if anything changes that I don't have control over, I'll get it, she said. You don't know that. No, she admitted. But I know Damien. I've known him for 4 years. She looked back over her shoulder. He's afraid of consequences. He's always been afraid of consequences. Tonight, I'm going to be the most immediate one. She went through the door. No. The ballroom was deep in the loose hour. The speeches done, the formal dinner cleared, the room given over to music and alcohol and the specific social abandon of people who'd fulfilled their obligations and were now just living in the event. The lights were lower. The dance floor was packed. She found Damien at the bar on the east wall. He was on his 3rd drink, she estimated. Not sloppy, but loosened, the careful management fully offline now. He was talking to a man she didn't know and laughing at something, and he looked for exactly that moment like someone who might actually be happy, and she stood 6 feet away and waited for him to see her. He saw her. The laugh finished itself and died. She looked at him once, deliberately, and then looked toward the side corridor door, the same one they'd used earlier, and walked toward it. He followed. She'd known he would. Humped. The corridor was empty. Same carpet, same recirculated air, the ballroom noise muffled behind the door. He came through behind her and started to say her name, and she turned and said, "There's a recording." He stopped. "3 years ago," she said. "A conversation with Harrison Lyle. You documented it." She watched his face cycle through denial and recognition and the particular gray quality of someone whose deepest private calculation has just been named out loud by the wrong person. "I need to know where it is." "How do you—" His voice had gone quiet. "Zariah, how do you know about— Where is it, Damien? You need to tell me how you know about that. There's a man in this building right now who is paid to make sure you don't leave it alive." She said it flat and even and watched him receive it, watched the color leave his face. "That contract is suspended for approximately 50 minutes. After that, suspension expires." She held his eyes. "The recording is the only thing that changes the math. Where is it?" He put his hand on the wall. His chest was moving faster. She watched the shock move through him. Not the soft shock of bad news, but the hard physical shock of mortal information, the kind the body responds to before the mind does. "You're serious," he said. "Damien." "Zariah, where is the recording?" He pressed his hand flat on the wall and looked at the carpet and breathed. She let him have 10 seconds. It was all the time she had to give. "Cloud backup," he said. "Encrypted. My lawyer has the key." He looked up. His eyes were wet. Not crying, but the body's autonomic response to adrenaline. "Zariah, what is happening?" "You borrowed money from the wrong structure," she said. "And 3 years ago you sat in a room and heard something you shouldn't have heard, and you were smart enough to record it, and not smart enough to realize that keeping it made you a liability." She held his gaze. "I need your lawyer's contact, tonight, right now. It's 11 p.m. I don't care." He stared at her. She watched him work through it. The disbelief, the fear, the specific quality of a man who has understood in this corridor that his wedding night is either the first night of the rest of his life or the last night of it, and that the difference is the woman standing in front of him. He took out his phone. His hands were shaking slightly. He found the contact and held the phone out. She looked at the name. Marcus Webb. She photographed it with her own phone. "The encryption key," she said. It's in a sealed letter at his office. I set it up so that if something happened, call him," she said. "Now, tell him to open the letter and send you the key." "Zariah, it's the middle of—" "Call him." He called. 3 rings. A groggy voice. Damien's own voice, stripped of the wedding night smoothness, raw and quiet, explaining to his lawyer that he needed the envelope opened now, tonight. It was an emergency. He'd explain later. She stood in the corridor and listened and watched his face and felt the 50 minutes ticking. The key came through as a text, a long alphanumeric string. "Log into the backup from your phone," she said. "Pull the recording file." He did it. His fingers were clumsy. She took his phone twice to correct his navigation. She was better under pressure than he was. Always had been. It was one of the things that had drawn him to her, and one of the things he'd never fully understood about her. And at 11:47 p.m., in a carpeted corridor off a wedding reception ballroom on the 3rd floor of the Alderton Grand, a 40-second audio file appeared on Damien Cole's phone. She airdropped it to herself. He watched her do it. "What are you going to do with it?" he said. "Make you safe," she said. "If it works, and if it doesn't." She looked at him. This man. This face she'd mapped over 3 years. The jaw, the eyes, the particular way he looked when he was afraid, which he'd only ever shown her in private. This man who had cost her a year and had dreamed about her 6 weeks ago and had pulled her into a hallway tonight to confess something he had no right to confess. "Then you take Monique and Elias and you leave Chicago tonight," she said. "You drive, don't fly, don't use your credit cards after the first tank of gas." She held his eyes. "But it's going to work." "Why are you doing this?" he said, quiet and raw. "After everything, why—" "Because your son is 7 months old," she said. "And because some things you do not, because the person deserves them, but because you're the person who can." She turned and walked back toward the ballroom door. "Zariah." His voice had something in it she hadn't heard before. Something that wasn't entitlement or regret or the careful performance of emotion. Something real and unguarded and too late. "I'm sorry. I know that's—" I know what it's worth, but I am. She put her hand on the door. I know you are, she said. She went back in. She found Tae-jun at the table. She sat beside him and did not look at the room, and opened the audio file on her phone and played 3 seconds of it for him under the ambient noise of the reception. He listened. His face didn't change. That's enough, he said. Can you get it to Lyle in a way that satisfies him tonight? A copy, not the original. Yes. While the original goes to... I have a contact at the Chicago field office, she said. Former client. I'm going to send it to his personal email with enough context that he understands what he's looking at. She looked at Tae-jun. By the time Lyle realizes the copy doesn't have the full encryption metadata from the original, it'll be in federal hands, and it won't matter. He was quiet for a moment. You have a contact at the FBI. Financial crimes. I helped his department untangle a fund structure 2 years ago. He owes me a conversation. She paused. I'm about to collect. Tae-jun looked at her for a long moment. Something moved through his face that she recognized now. That brief opening, the glimpse beneath the architecture. Send the file, he said. I'll handle Lyle. She sent it. Her hands were steady. The email to Agent Darnell Cooper, Chicago field office, written in 4 sentences that said everything that needed to be said without saying anything that could be misread. The recording, the context, Lyle's name, Damien's name, the instruction to move before morning. She pressed send and put the phone on the table and picked up her wine glass. Done, she said. Tae-jun had his own phone out. He typed something, different from before, this message longer, and sent it. Then he looked at her. Lyle will receive the file in 4 minutes, he said. He'll need 20 to verify it's real enough. That's 20 minutes before he knows it isn't the original. He held her gaze. Your federal contact needs to move before that. Darnell moves fast when he needs to, she said. He'll have the original in his hands in 7 minutes, and a warrant process started in 25. You're very certain. I'm terrified, she said. But yes. On the dance floor, Monique was dancing with her mother, white dress moving in the low light, her face turned up, eyes closed, present in the moment, the way only people who don't know what's happening behind the walls can be. Zariah watched her for a moment. Then she looked back at Tae-jun. There's something else, she said. He waited. The contract, she said. Even after tonight, even with Lyle neutralized, the people above Lyle, the ones you answer to. She held his eyes. Is this finished, or does it come back? He was quiet long enough that she felt the answer before he said it. I have to make a call, he said. Tonight, after we know Lyle is contained. There are people I can speak to who have more authority than the channel this came through. He looked at the table. It will cost something. What kind of something? A debt, he said, not financial. She understood what that meant. Understood that in the world he moved through, debts of that kind had long complicated afterlives. She looked at him and felt the weight of it. The thing he was offering to pay, the fact that he was offering to pay it. Tae-jun, she said. He looked at her. After tonight, she said, when this is settled, what happens? It was the question neither of them had asked, all through the dinner and the orchids and the corridor and the garage. The question that had been living underneath everything since a hotel lobby and a spilled coffee cup. He was quiet for a long time. Outside the windows, Chicago held its lights against the dark. I go back to Los Angeles, he said. I have business that doesn't stop. I know. My life is... He stopped. It's not a life that fits neatly alongside other things. I know that too. He looked at her. And you're still asking. I'm asking what happens, she said. Not what you can promise me. Not what it looks like in 5 years. Just what happens tomorrow. The day after. He looked at her for a long moment. The music moved around them. The room was all warmth and light, and the gorgeous, oblivious momentum of a celebration. Tomorrow, he said, I would like to have breakfast with you. Okay, she said. In a city where nobody is getting married. Something moved in her chest. Not the old grief, not the hollow thing that had lived there for 12 months. Something different. Warmer. More tentative and more real than the thing it was replacing. I can do that, she said. His phone vibrated. He looked at it, typed a reply, looked back up. Lyle confirmed receipt, he said. He's verifying. Her own phone buzzed. She looked at it. A text from a number she'd last used 2 years ago. Zariah. Got your email. Calling it in now. Don't go anywhere tonight. I'll need a statement in the morning. A pause. Then, good work. She exhaled. She put the phone down on the table and picked up her wine and looked out at the room. Damien was back at the head table. She could see him from here, seated beside Monique, one hand on the table near hers, his face composed in the way that would read to everyone in the room as a groom at the end of a long, happy day. Only she could see the particular quality of stillness in him. The man who now knew, who was sitting with what he knew, who would spend the rest of this night in the bright public space of his own celebration waiting to find out if he would walk out of it. He would. She was fairly certain he would. Monique caught Zariah's eye across the room. A long look. Nothing in it that could be read easily. Too many things layered over each other, the way 11 years of history layered over the single worst act, and didn't erase it, but didn't disappear either. Monique held the look for a moment, and then tilted her head slightly. A small motion, barely visible, that might have been acknowledgement, or might have been gratitude, or might have been the particular look of a woman who understood that something had happened tonight that she didn't fully have the context for, but that had somehow been on her behalf. Zariah held it for a moment and then looked away. Not forgiveness. She wasn't there. Maybe she would be, eventually, in the years ahead, in small increments that she'd give on her own timeline without being asked. But not tonight and not yet. Tonight she was simply done carrying it. At 1 a.m., the reception began to wind. The older relatives had gone. The dance floor had thinned to the truly committed. The staff moved through the room with the quiet efficiency of people beginning the long process of dismantling a celebration. Taejun had made his call, stepped away for 12 minutes, returned with the particular settled quality of someone who has paid a price and accepted it. He didn't tell her what the call had contained, and she didn't ask. She understood that there were parts of his world she would learn gradually, and parts she might never learn at all, and she had decided sometime in the last 3 hours that she could live inside that uncertainty. She had lived inside worse. At 1:15, Taejun's phone showed a message that he read, and then turned the screen toward her. 3 Korean characters. She didn't read Korean. It means concluded, he said. The order is withdrawn, permanently. She looked at the 3 characters for a moment. What did it cost you? She said. 18 months of something I was owed, he said. It's done. She looked at him. Thank you. He looked back. Don't thank me. I'm thanking you anyway. He was quiet. Then, with the smallest possible version of that almost smile, you're welcome. They left the ballroom at 1:30. The lobby was quiet at this hour. A few late-arriving guests, the front desk staff, the ambient murmur of a large building mostly asleep. The white orchid installation on the eastern wall had been dimmed, but not removed, the blooms still holding their shape in the low light. She stopped in front of them. Taejun stopped beside her. She looked at the orchids, the same ones she'd been looking at when she'd walked into him, when this whole 48 hours had pivoted into something she hadn't mapped and couldn't have predicted. She'd come to the city to survive a weekend. She'd come to hold herself together in an ivory dress in front of everyone she'd lost. That had been the entire ambition. She had, she thought, significantly exceeded it. I owe Camille a phone call, she said. Who is Camille? My friend. She told me to go find out if this was a good idea or a bad one. He considered that. What will you tell her? She looked at the orchids a moment longer. Then she turned toward the elevator. I'll tell her the jury's still out, she said, but I'm interested in the evidence. He walked beside her. At the elevator bank, he pressed the button and they waited in the quiet lobby in the small hours of a Sunday morning, the city outside still doing its patient thing. Lights on, water moving, the infinite unglamorous labor of a place that doesn't stop for anyone's good weekend or bad one. The doors opened. They got in. She looked at the numbers above the door and felt the day moving through her. All of it. The ivory dress, and the vows, and the corridors, and the garage, and the cold, certain voice of a man named Lyle and Damien's shaking hands, and Monique's white dress turning on a dance floor, and the specific weight of a decision made in a parking structure that she couldn't unmake and didn't want to. She felt it all settle. Not resolution in the way of things neatly concluded. Resolution in the way of things that have been fully lived. The particular exhaustion that only comes when you have been completely present for something that cost you and are still standing. She looked at her own reflection in the elevator doors. the black dress. Her face, tired, fully itself, not performing anything. She looked like someone who had come out the other side of something. Tae-jun was reflected beside her. Dark jacket, the edge of ink at his collar, his face still carrying that quality of stillness that she no longer found unsettling. She had come to understand it was not absence, it was the opposite of absence. It was a man who was entirely there, all the time, who had simply learned not to broadcast it. 14th floor, she said. 32nd, he said. The elevator moved. At the 14th floor, the doors opened. She stepped out and turned back. He stood in the elevator with his hand on the door hold, keeping it open. She looked at him. Breakfast, she said. Breakfast, he confirmed. Somewhere that isn't this hotel. I know a place. Of course you do. The almost smile. Fully itself this time. Not almost anything. Just a smile, brief and real, and belonging entirely to this specific man in this specific moment. She held it for a second. Then she turned and walked down the corridor to her room, and behind her the elevator doors closed, and the hallway was quiet. And through the window at the far end, the Chicago skyline held its lights against the dark water, the same as it had been holding them all weekend, patient and indifferent and completely beautiful. She unlocked her door and went inside. The orchids were still on the table by the window. She hadn't moved them. The city spread out behind them, all that light arranged against the dark, and she stood in front of it for a moment without turning on the lamps. She thought about Damien, wherever he was in this hotel right now, holding his wife's hand or lying awake or both simultaneously, carrying the knowledge she'd handed him in a corridor and the understanding that he would wake up tomorrow and his life would be what it was, and that would have to be enough. She thought about Elias, 7 months old, asleep in whatever nursery arrangement they'd made for the weekend, unaware that anything had hung in the balance tonight. She thought about Monique, who had overheard something real, who had looked at Zariah across a ballroom with 11 years of complicated history and said nothing and let it be nothing. She thought about Harrison Lyle, somewhere in the city or not in the city, receiving a file and not yet knowing what was coming for him. She thought about Tae-jun, 2 floors above her, in a room that was probably not so different from this one, the same city through the same glass. She didn't know what came after breakfast. She genuinely didn't. She understood that the man she'd had dinner with twice was not a simple prospect, that the world he moved through had its own gravity and its own cost structure, and that proximity to it would require things of her she couldn't fully anticipate. She understood that there was no clean version of this, no version where the complications resolved into something uncomplicated. She had spent a year trying to find an uncomplicated version of her life. She had been very disciplined about it, and very alone inside it, and very tired of both. She reached out and touched one of the orchid petals. White, cool, real. She took her phone out, opened it. Then she put it down on the table. Camille could wait until morning. She turned away from the window, pulled back the covers, lay down in the dark with Chicago's light coming through the glass the way it had come through all weekend, persistent, indifferent, beautiful. And she closed her eyes. She had come to this city to survive. She had survived. Everything else was tomorrow.